Imagine that you are required to try out for the Penn State football team. You have to complete the same drills and run the same sprints, catch the same passes, and throw the same distances. You even have to block the same linemen. Now, there's a big difference between most of us and most of the people trying out for a football team. Maybe you have a health issue like asthma or a heart condition, or maybe you've never played a minute of football in your life. Maybe you're like me and you're slightly vertically challenged, so your 5'2" frame just isn't going to match up against a giant lineman. Now move from the football field to a desk in a classroom. You're required to take a test, and the questions on the test are the same ones being taken by students across the state or even the country. Your answers on the test will be evaluated against all of these other students, regardless of your differences in abilities or disabilities. Now, the difference between this scenario and the football scenario is that this one is reality. It's the reality of standardized testing in our country. Now, the benefits of standardized testing can't be denied. With such a huge range of students across our country and so many students enrolled in school, there has to be a way to evaluate all these students against the same criteria. Before the early 1900s, this was accommodated by the fact that teachers were the ones creating the tests. They were able to individualize every test to what their students were learning and the differences in their students' abilities. As more and more students began enrolling in schools, the schools needed a way to evaluate this huge number of students against the same criteria, and this is how standardized testing began to come about. Both of the World Wars actually played a role in the development of standardized testing. In World War I, the military used a test called the Army Alpha to evaluate its potential recruits and determine if they were going to be able to participate in the military. This continued into World War II, and the military kept using tests like this. But this time, they collaborated with educators throughout the nation to help them implement standardized tests in the school systems as well. Even more recently, we've seen nationwide initiatives from our presidents, like President Bush's No Child Left Behind Act and Obama's Race to the Top plan. And both of these plans have increased the importance and influence of standardized testing in our country. They've held students all to the same standards, and their way of testing whether students have met those standards is by giving them standardized tests. The result of all of this is that every year, over 100 million standardized tests are administered in our country, and states are spending more than $1.1 billion on standardized testing every single year. The effect of standardized testing has been greater than just increasing the amount of money that states are spending and changing the type of tests that students have to take. It's affecting what teachers are teaching. With such a huge emphasis placed on standardized tests, teachers have had to change their lesson plans and change what they're teaching. They've had to accommodate for the concepts covered by the tests. And in fact, more than 66% of teachers believe that state tests have forced them to focus on test concepts to the detriment of other important topics. The impact of this can be devastating if teachers lose the ability to determine what their students should really be learning. Teachers have the most intimate knowledge of their students and how their students learn, the differences among their students and among their students' abilities. If they lose the ability to test those abilities and to really be the ones deciding what students should be learning, then our education system isn't going to be doing its job. What this really comes down to is that it's affecting what students are learning. Standardized tests are built so that the average student will be able to pass them. This means that students on either end of the spectrum are being disadvantaged. Higher achieving students might be receiving a dumbed-down education as a result. If teachers are spending so much time covering test concepts, they might not have as much time to really push these students to achieve higher levels of learning and teach them harder concepts. Disadvantaged students are also suffering because teachers have to spend so much time covering the test, they might not be able to develop skills that would be more beneficial to students. Standardized testing is affecting all of us. It affects students from elementary school to high school, and the learning that happens during that period continues to affect you for the rest of your life. The importance of standardized testing in our country isn't going to go away. With so many students enrolled in schools and such a huge variety of school systems, There has to be a way to evaluate all of these students fairly. What's most important is that we make sure that standardized testing doesn't become more important than learning, that filling in an answer on a bubble sheet doesn't become more important than understanding the concepts behind that answer. And most importantly, we have to make sure that we accommodate for differences in student abilities and understand that standardized testing, due to its nature, isn't going to evaluate all students fairly. Because when it comes down to it, putting someone like me up against someone like him just wouldn't be fair. Thank you.